North Beach Games now reunites with Sam Edwards, co-creator of the multi-million unit selling survival crafting hit Stranded Deep, to develop the long-awaited sequel, Stranded Deep 2. That is from a news article that came out on August 16th, 2024. That was 2 days ago as I record, and the news is reaching me as a surprise. I'm sure it's surprising most other people. Didn't see this one coming, but development has just kicked off, so there's nothing to see just yet, and I believe there won't be anything to see for a while. There's no ETA on a sequel to Stranded Deep, so we are going to be playing the original game for a while, but Daddy Cheese in the comments said, hey, as somebody who's been playing the game for a long time, do you have any opinions on what you would like to see in a sequel to Stranded Deep? And I'm like, yeah. As somebody who's been playing since 2016 and has damn near 800 YouTube videos out in the wild, there's a lot I would like to see in a sequel to Stranded Deep, an awful lot, but to keep this very simple, and because we don't have anything to see just yet, I'm going to narrow it down to just 5 things that I would like to see in Stranded Deep 2. Unreal Engine 5. The Unity engine does a good job in Stranded Deep as the game currently exists, and if you've ever stood on the beach and watched the sun rise, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. The sea starts off chocolatey brown in the morning, and you do not want to be swimming around in there. You don't know where the sharks are, you don't know where the little poison starfish are. It is a foreboding environment until midday rolls around and the sea becomes crystalline blue. It looks warm, it looks inviting. There are little fish swimming around the coral, and it is just such a beautiful place to be. But it can do with improvement, and I think the Unreal Engine 5 can bring that improvement from very minor things like the wind blowing through vegetation. It is something that's missing, and you can add with the mod, but in the base game, no, it's not there. Other things, water tessellation, it could be improved. The water looks pretty good as it is, but it doesn't really interact with beaches and islands at all. And if you throw something into the sea, there's no splash or sploosh. It just doesn't do anything. Throw a log in and it just, well, you have a log in the sea. Walk around waist deep in the water and you don't leave a wake behind you. There's no bubbles, there's no splashes, and there's no interaction where the waves roll up onto the beach. The water tessellation just kind of stops when it hits the sand, and it's fine. It looks okay, it's something we've lived with for a long time, but I think that could be improved. But, and there has to be a little bit of a caution, not too much, there needs to be a cartoony element to Stranded Deep. This is something I have thought about because one of the main antagonists are sharks. You've got the goblin shark, you have the great white, and you have the tiger shark, and that is on the PC version of the game. Yes, I believe the black tip reef shark in the console version is also an antagonist, but what I don't want to be doing is swimming around in the sea only to see a hyper-realistic tiger shark swimming directly at me. One of two things would happen. I might close the game, or I might just poo myself, because that is something that is a deep-seated fear within me as a human being. And just other things, like having shark textures updated and having actual eyeballs on the sharks instead of just a black dot might just add that extra level of realism, but yeah, maybe we do need to keep it a little cartoony. There are other things as well, like, well, when we're running up and down the beach, we don't leave any impression on the beach itself. We don't leave footprints. We don't leave our imprint on the island. And sand is soft. You build a house, you put a doorway on it, and you run backwards and forwards. There's no little groove carved by our feetsies in the sand. In the game War Thunder, you drive a tank through the desert. The tank is going to leave tank tracks behind it that other players can see and follow. Now, I'm not suggesting we dig holes in the world, it's not Minecraft after all, and I'm not really interested in that, but just some physical interaction with the world with our player might be a nice thing. I'd also like to see a huge change in island variety. Currently the game does 2 sizes of islands, big and small, and that's kind of it. Procedural generation is very limited in the game. It kind of works, but also kind of doesn't. A large island looks like a large island, and a small island looks like a small island. I'd like to see crescent islands, I'd like to see mountains, I'd like to see curious little archipelagos, I'd like to see huge levels of variety in the game, because currently, although it kind of works, you have to really jump into the map editor to make things more interesting. Story. In Stranded Deep, you survive a plane crash, you end up in a little yellow life raft, you spawn into the world and there is a tiger shark swimming around you more often than not. Nearby, there is a desert island, so you take the paddle, you get down and you paddle like crazy to hit the shore. And then your story begins. You need to build a shelter, you need to get a way of making water, and you need to get some food inside you. It's survival light, but it's still survival, and your story is how you survive and work your way out of Stranded Deep. Which is where a non sequitur happens. In order to actually leave the game, in order to complete the game, you need to fight 3 legendary boss monsters, a giant shark, a giant squid, and a giant eel, which, I mean, if you've been living passively for this whole time, fighting bosses seems a little bit out of place. What I would like to see is those lads replaced with a branching story, just a multiple ending system where maybe, and I've always wanted this, you find something like a giant float plane, a consolidated Catalina from the Second World War. Maybe you need to rebuild the engines. That might be one way of getting out of the island archipelago. You need to find the pieces to rebuild them, wiring, magnetos, cylinder heads, all of these bits and pieces. But putting them in might also be a puzzle unto themselves. You might need to find a manual or something in the world in order to assemble these. But if you don't, what if you don't find all of those pieces? Well, maybe there's a radio set that you could build, something that works on AM frequencies. Maybe you need crystals, and again, wiring. Maybe you need contacts. Maybe you can only use it at different times of day or when it's overcast, because AM radio signals bounce using the cloud layer of the Earth. You can either fly out or you can call for help, or if you do create a crystal radio set, maybe you can just listen to spooky sounds coming in over the airwaves, something a little bit horrific, but also expanding the story. Speaking of expanding the story, maybe there are the remains of other survivors in the game. We have that with the survivor shelters, but they don't really do much apart from give you a little bit of treasure. Maybe the survivors have left a notebook. Maybe we can have some VA, some voice acting in the game, telling the sad stories of other survivors. Or maybe there's a little bit of an upbeat note where they can point you to caches of useful equipment. There are things that can be done, and one of my favorite games is Disco Elysium. The voice acting in there just elevates the game from an okay third-person isometric game to something that gives a chef's kiss. Just the knowledge that you are not alone in the world, or you are traveling in the footsteps of other people who have been here before, is something that is compelling. Or at least more compelling than biffing up some monsters on your giant-ass raft. Survival and crafting. The game really is survival light. It doesn't make you watch too many timers tick down. We have food, water, SPF, which is sun protection factor, poison and bleeding, and that's about it. Some games make you watch a bunch of timers tick down. You got food, you got water, you got malaria, you've got the need to poop and beep and all manner of various bits and pieces. Hey, your dude's bored, might want to start singing now or reading a book, and it's like, no, this is too much, too many timers. Stranded Deep reaches a nice balance between allowing you to get busy crafting and the need to go and hunt fish, cook things up. Now these could be expanded upon. The cooking is basically putting stuff on a fire and leaving it, which is fine, but I would like to see some more variety added in. We have a hobo stove, but nobody really needs to use it. Once you've built the smoker, you just throw all your food on there, balance one piece on top of a fire, and that's it. That's everything you need to do. Can I not season my food for a little bonus? That will be interesting because it's easy to cook the food, but then a little bit more tricky to add that little bonus to it. Keep things simple, but then add the trickiness in something extra. Speaking of tricky, oh boy, if you've ever tried to build a house with a triangle section, you'll know exactly how much of a pain in the ass that is. I would like to see crafting, specifically house building, just given a huge revamp. It is one of those core things in Stranded Deep which I would love to see brought over to a new game, but, can we have more pieces please? I'd like to see right angles, I'd like to see curves, I'd like to see the ability to build things that are more interesting than just a box on stilts. And while I've tried to do things in the game, build houses high above the ground, you can only do so much with the tools you're given. That is fine. Also, there are tools in the game that just don't need to be there. The fishing rod is okay, but it's kind of a pointless thing once you've got a fishing spear. Some of the crafting items or some of the hunting items just kind of edge into each other's spaces. Just a refinement of those would be quite nice. And speaking of survival, and going back to sharks, not having them super realistic, but there needs to be a tell when a shark is in an area, because currently what happens is you go swimming in the sea and you're hunting fish, and you're like, I'm getting fish for my dinner. Well, spearing fish doesn't attract sharks, which I always found a little bit strange, but that could be a tell, something in the water that tells you when a shark is nearby. Otherwise, they just tend to spawn in behind you and start munching down in your toes like little twiglets or Twixes or chocolate bars. It's disconcerting when you have 2 tons of fish gnawing on your ankles. Maybe all the schools of fish disappear. Maybe there's something in the environment that says, uh-oh, I better get out before I start hearing the shark music, especially for people like me who are terrified of the open sea, the open water. I own a wetsuit, but I don't go anywhere where I can't see the bottom. Map Maker. It already exists in Stranded Deep. We already have a map maker, and when we've been playing a game for 8 years and we've done everything we think we can do, the map maker steps in and adds longevity to the game. It gives us the ability to create those fantastical home islands. It gives us the ability to create imaginary worlds. You want floating rocks? Well, you've got it. You want a giant container ship that's upside down and on fire? Well, we can't have the fire, but we can do the container ship that's upside down. The map maker adds life to any game. We've been doing this since Warcraft, making our own maps, and if it's built into the game, then that is something that is going to be used, especially by me, who is doing a map editor series currently. In Unreal Engine 5, I would like to see everything brought forward but expanded upon. I'd like to see more items, more objects. I'd like to see more variety, and I'd like to have more minutiae, more fine control over the things that are in the game. I'd like to see the ability to scale items and objects. I'd like the ability to have a number of objects in the world and know that actually, once I make the map live, some of those are going to be culled, so that we don't just run afoul of frame rates. I'd like the ability to add things in that they were talking about but never did, like the ability to have streams and waterfalls. Ultimately, a map maker needs to make its way into Stranded Deep 2, if the game is to live as long as the first one has. The console. You may not have noticed that every single video that I do in the main Stranded Deep game starts at 6 o'clock in the morning. It starts at 6 o'clock in the morning on another beautiful day in paradise. But wait, how do you time it so perfectly? Well, I'll let you into a secret. I use the console and set the time to 6 o'clock in the morning. For a content creator, the ability to access the console and the ability to change things like weather, which we can't do at the moment, the ability to change things like the time of day, which we can do, the ability to fly around and just set things up for a video, which we can do, is absolutely invaluable. To carry the console over from Stranded Deep 1 to Stranded Deep 2, just to give us a few things that we can use in-game to set up videos, will be amazing. Because although it's not absolutely needed, I want to give you guys the best opportunity to see the game, and if we're just running around in the dark because of the day-night cycle, especially during the early stages of a game when we haven't got a shelter set up yet, Well, that's not visually interesting for you guys. I tend to skip the night section as much as I can because I know that YouTube is a visual medium and so is Twitch. The ability to access the console for content creators is that's good. It's really good, and that is something I would like carried over. I'm going to leave the list there for now. Just 5 things. We'll know more about the game when development is further into it, but for the time being, that's what I want to see based on what we currently have. It's interesting though, based on the news article, Sam Edwards is listed as Creative Director and Chief Technology Officer of North Beach Games. But I'm not seeing Ben Massey's name anywhere. Sam was the art lead and Ben was the programmer, I think, from the original game. I'm not entirely sure what's happening with Ben, and I don't know if he's working on Stranded Deep 2. Whatever happens, I hope Ben is happy in life, because we should all be that way. But I'm going to leave it there for the time being. If you like these videos, definitely leave a like, leave a subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. If you want notifications, dingle the bingle. If you don't want notifications, don't click the bell, and I'll tell you what, I'll catch you next time.